screenshot.
So, yeah, if anybody wants to take a screenshot, I will send samples out with all the follow-up from today's classes. So I could level that. Right, there we go. Basically it's the same string. I started with this little loop thing, and then when I looked at what our strings were for tomorrow, for those of you that are in boot camp, I thought, oh, they're going to think I stole that. I didn't, but there's one string tomorrow that's got a couple loops in it. So, yeah, gave you an option, but basically it's pretty much the same string, just going in different directions. I'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll show you how I set that up. But so we've done I wanted to do something that had some repetitive motions to it, partly because I wanted to make sure there was something that having a new person in class would feel comfortable. And because it's always good to have that extra practice. So whatever surface you're using is fine. I'm going to be using a 3.5-inch tile. And our second step is putting dots in all four corners. So I'm going to start with that and try to make them, get this a little darker. You don't want to make them too terribly dark, but I'm going to do it with pencil. And I intentionally, on one of these, I did 3 sides that were straight, and on the other one, I did just wavy random lines. And it really doesn't matter if you're trying to get them straight. My advice always is to look at where your pencil's going and not at the tip of your pencil. And then I did a random wavy line. It's kind of an elongated S shape. You could do it in reverse. You could do it as an S. I did it from, about somewhere like on one side, doesn't matter which side or where, or if you do it down the middle, or about, I don't know, maybe 1/4 to 1/3 of the way down to about the halfway point-ish, or maybe a little lower. So I just did a little thing like that. Doesn't have to be perfect, because the Zentangle. So you have your border, you have your entire string, which you can change a little bit if you want as we go along. And then I did ink in my border on this, but again, you don't have to. This also gives you a chance to tweak it. That pen's not doing so hot. So the basis of what I did on my samples, and the basis of almost all of the tangles today, is the Tangle Crescent Moon. So I'm going to, just for the sake of at least being somewhat consistent here, I'm going to pick a side, just put some, yeah, okay. I'm gonna do something and then I'm gonna kind of pause for the rest of it. And there's a reason for it. So crescent moon is kind of like a C shape, actually. That we normally ink in. We tend to call those ladybug bumps. And I'm gonna put, I think, 3 of these across the bottom. It's kind of spaced out randomly. They don't have to be even. They don't have to be the same size. And then we normally do what we refer to as, fix that element, um, as putting an aura on these, which is basically a parallel line that follows the shape. And for those of you that are right-handed, it's helpful to turn your tile so that you're drawing this aura on the right and you aren't covering up what you're doing with your hand. And then normally we add more and more auras, but I'm going to leave that for now because I want to play with the rest of my string because we have some ribbon tangles and I wanted to make sure that I gave some time to that. So I'm going to ink over my little line. And I'm only using an eraser because I don't want you to think you're cross-eyed. And you see that I didn't go over it. So what I did on both of mine is I decided that I was going to put something in a band going across. And some I did one and some I did two. Um, one of them I kind of started doing a hollabah thing where I was drawing behind and crisscrossing ribbons. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to use these for those border tangles and the 3 that we have in our stack here. Well, 4 of them actually. Shattuck, reticulated, OV, and OV, 3 of them. 2 of them have these narrow auras on them. So I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of an aura there. And I'm going to make my first band the way, and yours might be divided differently. So go where you have room, but I'm going to go, it's not a half an inch, but it's probably a little more than a quarter over. And I'm going to do another aura, another parallel line to my first one, which is tricky because my first one isn't real straight. I'm going to add So that'd be a nice big border. So, I'm going to start with, and this is the way I did mine. I started with this. One of them I did two. I have two. One of them I have one. Doesn't matter where you put tangles. If you decide you only want to work with one tangle, that's fine. Some of you are going to go off and do your own thing anyway. So I'm going to spend my time showing you a couple things. One is how to do all the tangles, but also some of the goofy or more bizarre things that I did. So I'm going to go through Shattuck. I know most of you have done this before. But Shattuck, we're using that same C-curve shape. I'm going to start at this top end, one of the ends on my column, and do a curve. And then I'm going to do these auras that get smaller. Doesn't matter how many, just depends on your space that you've got. I've got 4, they're not even, it's okay. And I know this seems counterintuitive, but then I like to turn the angle of my tile, and I'm gonna do where this one came down, I'm gonna go up in the opposite direction with a curve. And I know you look at it and you think, I should be able to start at the small end. Why am I doing it this way? I promise you, it just seems to come out more even doing it this way. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to keep alternating and doing that all the way down. And the optional thing, because it's the same type of stroke as crescent moon, is to ink in. I like inking in that first, the smallest section there. You don't have to. Don't forget to breathe.
I never realized that Shattuck could look like a crescent moon if you color in the first couple areas.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Amazing. So normally I would just start demonstrating tangles on scrap paper and let everybody go in their own direction, which obviously those of you who are experienced are welcome to do. But do it a little different today and do it with a little more a little more intention on a couple things. So everybody good? Yes, no. Okay. So I'm going to do what I did on my first sample, which was I had fun playing with. I played with a couple tangles and used them in a different way. So the tangle I'm going to start doing now is footlights. And I'm going to put footlights so that it's facing. You don't have to, if your space is different, don't worry about that. I'm going to do it so that it's actually facing my little crescent moon. And it starts the same way. And you can put as few or as many of these ladybug bumps as you would like. You don't want them super, like, you don't want them actually necessarily touching. You want to have a little bit of space in between them, like enough space for at least an aura or more. I kind of spaced mine out a bit, but they can be very random. And this is one of those, usually our tangle names don't make any sense or have anything to do with what the tangle looks like. This one, however, footlights is looks like footlights on a stage. And once you have your bumps, you're going to do one aura line around each one. And then you're going to go back and do one more round around your crescent moons. Everybody good? Anybody need a minute? Okay. See a couple people going, 1 minute, please. So got it. So when you've got for those that are following along, when I have my footlights over here, they just look like crescent moons with one aura, don't they? Well, footlights are like stage lights. So if you were just doing these by themselves, you would have your aura, and then you would have the lights going out. And they don't go all the way to the bottom. So usually you've got 5 sections about. So we're going to play a little fun, and those of you that are familiar with the Tangle Arucus, we're going to kind of do a similar thing with this. So when I'm doing this, I'm starting with the middle of my footlight, and I keep turning my tile as I go so that I can line these up. And I'm going to do something that starts at my footlight and stops when it gets, you can make them wider or narrower when it gets to the crescent moon. I'm just going to do the middle one, and then I'm going to go to my next one. And that one's going to hit about there. They're all going to be a little different from where they're positioned, right? And in Zentangle, we generally don't crisscross our lines. So unless it's part of a specific tangle, generally we're just gonna treat it like a solid object. So this one, it's kind of at an angle there. And it probably would continue, so I would probably draw behind here. And once you have that first row, that center light beam connecting down to crescent moon, then you're going to turn your tile so that you're working back with your crescent moon. I know, it's crazy, right? And add another aura. And so these auras are going to stop whenever they hit one of those light beams. And there will be some sections where, like in between here, there really isn't room to, there's light beams there, there's no auras coming through. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to add another row of light beams. So two ways you can do this. You can do both sides of each one as you go along, or you could do like all of the ones on the right side and then go back and do all the ones on the left side, which is probably what I'm going to do. And depending on your space, you might only get 2 or 3 beams of light coming off of any particular footlight. Don't worry if you cross over something, shading will fix all that. And then you can keep going, alternating back and forth, depending on how much space you have and how full you want to make it. So obviously down at this end of my tile, I don't have a lot of room and I can maybe do one more row, but down here I could do several if I wanted to, or I could just hit my maximum here and stop. So, and generally you're not going to do more than about 5 of these beams off of anything. So I'm gonna go do this. Now I have to use my imagination to see where my I don't really have a lot of room to do much more here. I can add some way up top. And that's my crazy space. And here's where you get to be thinking about what you want to do. You don't have to put all of the tangles in your tile. You might decide you're going to do two. You might decide that you like this and you want to do it going in the opposite direction, and that's just fine. You might want to add another aura and do one of these other ribbon tangles. Um, you might decide you've had enough of that and you've had enough of auras and crescent moons and you want to do something completely different or add some poke leaf and poke root, which I will get to. So I'm going to show you on a little scratch pad a couple of these newer ones that probably look really simple, but they are going to take some focus. And again, everybody doesn't have to do the same ones. So I'm going to start with OV. And it starts with these parallel narrow auras. So like a little ribbon. And if you don't have space, you can just do a single border. The actual step out that Adam drew, he draws his orbs first, and I found that a lot more difficult to do. So it's called OV because first there's an O because you have this orb. There's and something that looks like a V and something that looks like a Y. So there are these curves, which I tend to do off to the side a bit. And you do want them to have not quite a point, but as opposed to just doing a curve like that, he's got them going like that. Whatever way you do, just be consistent and don't sweat it because it'll work. And then that has an aura. And then you decide how big of a space you want. And you do another one. It's like a rounded V. And this is where the crescent moon-ish part comes in, you put an orb. Remember, we call them orbs because we're doing this freehand. They're not going to be perfect circles. That gets inked in. Or you can ink it in and leave a little white spot so it's got a little highlight. And then you aura the orb. Once you've done that, then you do a straight line. So we had this V, we had the O, and you do this aura line down the middle, which is where you get the Y. Mm. This one is actually pretty reflective, meditative tile, the tangle to do. And then you make these auras. So just like crescent moon, and you aura that curve of that orb. So you go to the middle of the line, pick up your pen, continue on the other side. Somebody's gonna ask, why is she putting two auras? Well, because I oopsed. I'm using it as an opportunity. And then I'm gonna put my straight lines. Because there are no mistakes in Zentangle. So I'm going to go through the other tangles. You don't have to use them. I'm going to demonstrate them for those that want to find a spot to use them. And I'm going to start with, let's see, what have we done? Let's go alphabetical here. Frunky, which is an old Zentangle tangle that you don't see done very often. But normally, wherever you have a line, you do these little, what we call fescue shapes. So you would have them, they could go to the right or to the left. They come up with a little teardrop, slight curve. And usually these are done where in groups of three, where they gradually get taller, but you can kind of play with that too. Maybe you want the middle one taller, maybe you want them all the same. Doesn't matter. And then this gets an aura that goes around it. So it's not going to go all the way in between. It's just going to go a little boom, boom. And then you do these very close together C-shaped curves like crescent moons. So you can do them straight. You can do them off an angle, make them really close. You could kind of skip your pen, just kind of get a little highlight going in there. And you would do that on either side. And then you would start adding some more of these little triplets. So these might continue in the same way, or they might go in the opposite direction. And you just keep building off of those with the auras. So kind of slightly changing direction, give it a little more interest. And you fill up your space like that. The other one that's fun to do is this, I call it Ixorus. Some people call it Isurus. But you don't have to have 6 spokes. So if you on what did I put 5 spokes on this one? But I just fit it in this little corner here, so it just had basically 3 spokes on it. And if you're doing it with, let's say 6, like in the step out, you would divide your space like an X with a line through it. So you have 6 pie shapes. And then you do, and this is a subtle thing, but it does make a difference in how this comes out. A narrow aura, and you do it on the same side. So if you do it on the right, you do it on the right. If you do it on the left, you do it on the left. And do it the same way all the way around. And the way this normally starts, and it depends on how long your space is, because I have been known to go in and add extra shapes along the way, is you start with a ladybug bump on one side, but actually it's like you're doing the letter S. So you make one shape, you come across, it's going to be a little bit further down, right? And you go like that. I'm just going to do 2 of these to give you an idea of what happens. And then you start doing the auras. So I'm going to use this middle section here. And if I've got a really big space, I might pop another one on the other side or near the bottom, just depends on the space I have. I'll do this one. So you do, and you alternate your auras back and forth within your space. Oops. But you end up with this, that was kind of crooked. You're going to end up with almost like a continuous swirl pattern that's going to keep going around. That's what gives it the extra movement. So we've got two more tangles that use the crescent moon shapes in them. And the first one is Jewels. And she said she named it that because she thought it looked like jewels. Um, I'm going to do this fairly large because it's the only way that I can fit those little orbs in the way she does it. I did not use those in mine. When I did mine, I decided to just ink in some of the auras. This one I added little dots in the middle of my diamond shapes. Um, and I'm doing this different than the way she does it, but I started with the X's. She starts with the curves, which I found kind of difficult to do. So, um, you can elongate these X's or you could make them all this, more squat and square like that, or you can make them long and narrow. Doesn't really matter. Um, and you just connect them by the edges, and then you start doing auras. She does 4 on hers. With the fourth one going from the outside, the point of one X to the point of the next. And I decided when I was doing mine, because I just couldn't seem to get that third aura wide enough to fit orbs in, that I was just going to be consistent. So if my outside aura ended up being larger, then I did that all the way across. You could do your outside edge first, similar to Shattuck. You could decide that you're just going to put 3 auras in there. She does 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and in that second edge from the outside, she adds orbs. Also depends on how fat of a pen you're using and how tiny you're tangling, whether you will fit orbs in there or not. And as we all know, I am not a tiny tangler. Mhm. Mhm. I'm going to run through these next couple. You may want to just take notes, or so I have time to show you guys some shading. the last one that had a crescent moon shape, and I'm sure some of you have already popped it in already, is this reticulated. And she does these crescent moon shapes. She actually, I didn't do that the way she did it. She does them basically touching or almost touching each other. So what I found was easier to do in this, you can do it this way where you do your shapes and then add an aura. Or you can start with your aura. I know that's backwards, but actually make the aura part. Just make your bigger outside C shape and add your little ladybug bump inside, which is how I was doing it when I did my tiles. And then it has just straight lines. So if you have a curve, you might have to turn your tiles so that you're kind of lining them up. And they're not all or at absolutely the same distance. You can have some fun with this. You could also decide you were going to ink them in, or maybe put other little lines in between. And reticulated, amazingly, after we had our discussion about New Zealand and their lack of snakes the other week, Miss Chua named it reticulated because her favorite animal is a reticulated python. Which kind of changed my whole outlook on this tangle when I read that. Sometimes it's good to read the little write-ups they have about their tangles on tangle patterns, and other times you kind of wish you hadn't. This was one of those times. And I know there's at least one person who hasn't done poke root and poke leaf. So this is what I threw in just to break things up. And you could, I'm probably going to have it popping out of, I don't know, this kind of looks like a vase. So I'm going to, poke leaf and poke root both start the same way. They start with a stem, which can be straight or curved. There's a narrow aura. And then there's a cap at the top. So that cap could curve, or it could be straight, or I usually end up with something like this where I add a little ink on both sides. And then for poke leaf, you just come around like a teardrop that goes behind the stem. And everybody does them differently. So sometimes mine get real curved. One of the things Maria does a lot that I like is she'll go back up to this point and put another little S curve, elongated S curve in there. It kind of makes it look like the edge of the leaf is turned over. And the other tangle that goes with this real well is poke root, although it's really a poke berry, but so poke root would start the same way, except that it's an orb shape. And these can be, they can crisscross behind each other. Or they can kind of stack around each other and fill up an entire space. They don't have to be used together. Does anyone have questions on anything, or do they want to see something? Because what I'll do is give you guys like 10 or 12 minutes, and then I'll show some shading.
Did you mean to be working off screen?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thank you. I thought I was missing something.
No, I wanted to wait I wanted to do a couple better on
I
a
just didn't
couple
want
of
to
these
miss.
to do for shading for you guys. So that was my,
I just didn't want to miss anything, you know me.
no, no, and and my experiment didn't work, so it didn't really matter.
Oh.
Sometimes I do experiment, so there you go. So shading on these, whoops, get a nice short pencil here so I can hold it close to my paper. In general, on our crescent moon shapes, usually we put some graphite along either side. We don't go over the black, large sections of black, because we just end up with a silver shiny spot. And then we take our tortillon, again, kind of holding it at an angle, so we're using the tip and blend that into paper. Leaving the middle as a highlight. On Shattuck, usually we're gonna, whoops, use a sharp pencil, silly. Usually we're gonna put a little bit of graphite where one set of lines runs into the other. Doesn't take a lot. And when this gets blended, it's going to give it more of a 3D effect so that it looks like one section is tucked behind the other one. And then depending on your space and if you've got room, or if you like it the way it looks, if not, if you want some more definition, you can add some along one or both of the edges of the aura. Remember, it's just pencil, so if it's too dark, it's okay. You do it on one side or both sides. So when we get to this, if you followed along with this interaction of footlights and crescent moon are we do the same way. And the footlights, you can either put some, well, a couple things. You can put some graphite right at the base of these bands of light. Just pull them up. And you can, just like in Shattuck, you can put a little bit where there's overlap. Again, you can do part of this, all of this. Another thing that you can do is run graphite. You have a nice sharp pencil and a pointy tortillon, depending on how big you made your lights. You can just run the graphite straight down the sides. If your tortillon's too fat, then you end up with all of your lights being gray. And remember, in Zentangle, when we're shading, we are not shading for light source. We're simply shading for what we're putting in the background and what we want to emphasize. If we want to bring something forward, we want to shade the area around it. And if you've got multiple ribbon shapes, you could put, if you need the emphasis, you can shade along the edge in between. For Obi, I found shading kind of around the bottom of that V and then along the edges, but you could also shade around the orb. It's just you have a small space, so I wouldn't do all of that, because if you do all of it, you're not going to have any highlights. If you don't have any highlights, there's no contrast. Ixorus would get shaded the same way as crescent moon. I'm gonna do when I did jewels on this one, I wanted to just shade around the outside to give it some emphasis. So that was where I concentrated my shading. On this one, I put, and I think I just used my tortillon. I don't think I actually added graphite. I just put a little bit at the base of those auras. But you could decide that what you wanted to do was leave the auras plain and shade in the inside of the triangles too. And on poke leaf and poke root, I usually just shade around where things overlap. I don't do too much inside the tangles, but you can put a little curve shading. The other way to shade on Ixorus is to do to shade where the overlap, where it comes together. So kind of call that the crease, but I know that's not the. And when you have it the way you like it, or at least where you're done, you put your chop on there, which in Zentangle language is basically putting your initial someplace or your mark. So it can be in the border, outside the border, it could be part of your pattern. I think I'm gonna put mine over here. And then sign and date the back with put the names of the tangles, which I'm gonna let you guys do that in your own time. But do take the time to do that, because when you go back and look at it, however far down the road, you go, oh, what was that called again? And then we hold it at arm's length and take a moment of appreciation for what we did. But since we're in a group, we're going to actually share what we did. So does anybody need to see anything before I turn my camera on? You guys been so quiet today.